Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. Yes, I know it's been a minute since I've done anything, but good news is a few changes. I have moved to a new apartment. I'm in living in a new apartment. So much more of a peace of mind, so much better. You'll see a new vibe on this podcast and on my channel. Um, but I am still currently finishing up season 10. I have been going through some personal stuff, so please bear with me. I do apologize for that. Um, I've just been keeping it together the best I can, and just it all took a toll on me. Um, but I'm happy. I'm in a new place. I have more of a peace of mind and so much more peace. So if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. But today on Down the Rabbit Hole, we are going to be talking about the Spanish Fork Weeping Lady. This is episode 157. Yes, I know we've done over 100 episodes so far, and yet some of y'all don't like them. That's okay. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But it's hard to really imagine Utah being not being known for its Mormon influence. Well, there's a city in Utah called Spanish Fork. It is part of the Provo Ora Metro, and it lies in Utah Valley within the Wasatch Range in the east of the Utah Lake and the northeast. To the northeast. Now, the Spanish Fork Weeping Lady refers to a statue of a woman weeping over a grave in the Spanish Fork Cemetery. And locals believe that the statue, especially at night or when it rains, some say you can hear it crying. Um, if they walk around the cemetery with their eyes closed, and the statue is a memorial of Laura Daniels Ferde, who died in 1929, and her husband Horace, who was buried next to her. Now, here's some. Now, let's give a little bit more of a detail, shall we? Because it is on my travel bucket list. But the statue depicts a woman kneeling with her face in her arms of a poignant image of grief. Lord Daniels Faraday. The statue commemorates Laura, who died in 1929 at the age of 32. Jorge Faraday, her husband, was buried next to her in 1972. Yeah. So what about the legend? Well, look at me saying well. Well, okay, my country really just came out on that one. Anyway, the legend says that the statue cries, particularly at night or when it rains, and if you walk around the cemetery with your eyes closed, you can hear the statue weeping. In other legends go where some residents have also heard stories about the statue weeping on the anniversary of each child's death. Now, let's talk about the real story, right? Well, while the legend does persist, the exact reasons for the statue is its association with weeping is not definitive known even to the longtime residents, but it is a unique and intriguing landmark within the cemetery, inspired by both fascination and a sense of mystery. Um, let's talk about a little bit about Spanish Fork real quick, okay? Spanish Fork was settled in 1851 by members of the LDS Church, as part of the Mormon pioneer settlement in Utah Territory. Its name derives from the visit by two Franciscan friars from Spain, Silvestre Perez de Escalante and Francisco Anastasio Dominguez in 1776. 1776, why does that year sound familiar? All my history buffs know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and they were followed the stream down the Spanish Fork Canyon with the objective of an opening of a new trail in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to the Spanish missions in California, along with a route later followed by fur traders as well. Now, they describe the area um, as being inhabited by Native Americans, saying spreading meadows where there's a sufficient irregular land for good settlement. Over the finest of the advantages, and it has plenty of firewood and timber adjacent to the Sierra, which surrounds itself, many sheltered spots in that. Now, in 1851, um, settlers led by William Pace set up scattered farms in the Spanish Fork bottomlands, and it is called and is called the Upper Settlement. However, a of larger group congregated and became known as the Lower Settlement in the now northwest of the present center of Spanish Fork, the Spanish Fork River. In December 1851, Stephen Markham, who was severely wounded outside Carthage Shell in Illinois while attempting to defend Joseph Smith and the other land members of mob in 1844, became the president of the First Church Congregation at the Lower Church Settlement. In 1852, the LDS founded a settlement called Palmaya, west of the historic center of Spanish Fork. Now, George A. Alley supervised the laying out of the town site, including a temple square that year. A fort and a school were built in Palmyra site in 1852. With the onset Walker War in 1853, and most of the farmers in the region were not yet in the Palmyra first moved in. Now, some of the people did not like that, so they moved to a different site at the mouth of the Spanish Fort Canyon, where they built a structure called Fort St. Luke. Also in 1854, they also founded a fort founded approximately 2 miles south of the center of Spanish Fork that later was known as Old Fort. Now, between 1855 and 1860, the arrival of the pioneers from Iceland made Spanish Fork the permanent Icelandic settlement in the U.S. Now, the city also went its name in 1865 to the Treaty of Spanish Fork, where the youth were forced to, by an executive order by President Lincoln, to relocate to the Uinta Basin. Now, since we have our history of the town, why don't we talk about the history of the Weeping Lady tombstone in Spanish Fork at all? Isn't that why you clicked on? Well, eternally carved into the stone, the Weeping Lady has been kneeling at a gravesite of Lord Daniels Faraday of Payson since Faraday died in 1929. One hand on the Weeping Lady pressed against the wall with her face buried, and her husband was laid to rest next to her in 1972. Now, according to a decades-old legend, if you walk around the city cemetery with your eyes closed, you can hear the statue weep. Connie Swain remembers other children telling her the legend in a prominent tombstones when she was a child. Like many residents, does not know much about it. Now, Clarence Williams, who lived in nearby Woodland Hills, says he's been told by local teenagers that the legend of the Weeping Lady still lives. I actually want to go just to experience it. But Williams and his family have visited the grave many times, and William was struck by its beauty. He was so intrigued that he started researching the legend and history, and he said it was just breathtaking. And indeed, while residents were familiar with the statue and the legend, and survived decades, the tombstone history is more of a mystery than anything. Now, Now, the Weeping Lady in Spanish Fork is known to everyone, but no one has any details on her, and it's been like a lot of old timers of the cities know nothing of her history. Now, this leads us to Tim Morin, who's 87. He remembers the family when he was living in Spanish Fork, and he went to school with the Faraday children. Horace Faraday was a well-known plumber in Spanish Fork in the 1920s. In 1929, Laura was 32, and she died in Provo of an infectious tumor, according to the city wards. And it was, and he was, and Warren was in the 6th grade at the time. Now, according to him, her grieving husband had the statue erected in remembrance and his feelings of his lovely wife. And this was beneath the Weeping Lady. Warm summers, sunshine kindly here. Gentle breeze blows softly here. Mother Earth above lie light. Good night, sweetheart. Good night. Now the poem does have a resemblance to the final words of the poem Annette by 19th century poet Robert Richardson. Mark Twain, who also adapted the poem for his daughter's headstone. Faraday relatives still live in Spanish Fork, but were reluctant to talk about the tombstone. Now, Morin recalls that Horace eventually packed his family and business and moved to Idaho, but later was buried next to his lady. Now, Morin has lived across the street from the cemetery for 44 years, and the only thing he hears from the cemetery at nighttime is screaming of teenagers who want to go and play. Now, his neighbor used to walk the cemetery at night until a teen jumped him from behind the tombstone. So, the weeping ladies are common in the cemeteries in the U.S. In the world, and one of the more prominent one in Utah, the Weeping Lady of Logan Cemetery. Yep, there's more. But the statue of the Concreus plot is of popular younger adults who visited during the full moon in response to the legend that they can hear her mourn the children. Now, the 10 foot tall statue was put in honor of Julia Conquest by her husband, Olaf Conquest, after she died, and according to her great granddaughter, Lana Murdoch, she had 8 children, but 5 of them survived. But 5 of them died in childhood between 1889 and 1901. And that same night, stricken with grief, Julia would drive to the cemetery in her Shirley Dillon wrap, and when she was crumbled in 1914, at the age of 55, many people said she died of a broken heart. Now, another Weeping Lady statue was kneeling over the magicians of Harry Houdini's grave in Malkasie Cemetery in Queens, New York, still grieves over the grave of F.W. Blanchard. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery in California, and Blanchard developed a Hollywood Bowl. Now, there's also a legend in Parkersburg, West Virginia, where a Weeping Lady's tombstone says her ghost was known to stroll around the South High Academy, and the school was raised 3 years ago. Now, the statues are particularly predominant in France, where the Weeping Lady statue in Logan was carved, and in France they call it Les Pleurantes, which is French for the weepers. And a prominent one roots on the tombstone at Père Lachaise Cemetery. I'll be honest with y'all, I took French in high school. I barely remember any of it. Do not judge me. Um, but I'll see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day. And who knows what we'll be talking about then?